Like and subscribe right now, or this spider will crawl on your face when you're sleeping. If you drive on the highway, chances are you've seen a truck carrying an oversized load at least once. These loads might be heavy machinery, houses, or materials, but it is very uncommon to see truly momentous-sized loads being transported. We have a list of the biggest things ever transported, including a windmill blade. So, without wasting any more time, let's get into it. Number 10. The Titanic. We start with the Titanic, the massive floating luxury hotel that met with a tragic fate by colliding with an iceberg on its maiden voyage in 1912. The Titanic was launched the old-fashioned way, by using gravity to slide it down into the water. On the day of its initial launch in May 1911 from the Belfast shipyard where it was built, the Titanic became the biggest object ever moved by humans up until that time. The ship, which at that time was still being finished, weighed roughly 26,000 tons. Workers used 22 tons of tallow and soap to create a 1-inch thick layer of lubrication on the slipway, so that the Titanic's bulk could be eased down into the water. At a quarter after noon that day, a rocket was launched in celebration and the timbers holding back the ship were knocked free, and it slid down into the water. The cheering crowd didn't realize it, but the ill-fated ship's launching also caused the first of its many fatalities. A worker named James Dobbins was struck by one of the timbers and reached his demise.
Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that'll take 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and you'll get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it. It really works.
Number 9. Moving of Cape Hatteras Lighthouse. In 1999, the Cape Hatteras Light Station, which consists of 7 historic structures, was successfully relocated 2,900 feet from the spot on which it had stood since 1870. Because of the threat of shoreline destruction, which is a natural process, the entire light station was safely moved to a new site, where the historic buildings and containers were placed exactly as they had been at the original site. While the National Park Service has met its obligation to both historic preservation and coastal protection, the move of the historic station, especially the lighthouse, was hotly debated and closely watched. After it was lifted, the tower moved along to its new location 2,900 feet to the southwest on steel mats starting on June 17, 1999. Steel track beams became rails, and roller dollies permitted the support frame to move along the track. On July 9, 1999, the lighthouse was carefully placed onto its new foundation. The light station was whole once again, with all the buildings being in the same relative position as they were originally. Number 8. Levitating Mass. In ancient Greece, the rules punished people by making them move huge pieces of rocks on top of mountains for the rest of their lives. Fortunately, the crew charged with moving a 340-ton boulder from a valley in Riverside County, California, to the Los Angeles County Museum of Art only had to do it once. Using heavy machinery, they lifted the boulder, which is believed to be the biggest ever moved, onto a 176-wheel transporter truck. They drove it at night over roads that were temporarily closed to traffic so that it wouldn't present a hazard to drivers. The vehicle traveled along at a speed of 10 miles per hour, and it took a week and a half to make the journey. The purpose of this exhausting exercise was to provide artist Michael Heiser with raw material for his giant outdoor sculpture, Levitating Mass, which allows visitors to walk down a 456-foot-long, 15-foot-deep concrete crib that runs underneath the boulder. Michael Govan, the museum's chief executive, told the Los Angeles Times that it's pretty clear that this is one of the largest monoliths that's ever been moved. Number 7. Onegito. Onegito, also known as the Cape York Meteorite, is a scary big 4.5 billion-year-old piece of an asteroid that fell out of the sky and landed in Greenland about 10,000 years ago. Non-Greenlanders first heard about it in 1818, but it wasn't until 1894 that fearless Arctic explorer Robert E. Peary actually located the meteorite. For some reason, he thought it would be a swell idea to take it back to the American Museum of Natural History in New York. Before Peary could get the meteorite onto a ship, he had to get it to the coast, and that required the construction of Greenland's first and only railroad. It took 3 years to get all that done and transport the meteorite to its present location. where it sits on a special display stand whose supports are anchored into the bedrock beneath the museum. Have you ever seen a meteorite? Number 6. A desalination unit evaporator. In January 2012, Al Majdoui, which is a project logistics and supply chain company, also a very fancy way of saying it moves stuff, transported a giant device called an evaporator down a road to a water desalination plant being built in Saudi Arabia. Unfortunately, the company's press release doesn't detail the distance that the machinery traveled, but it does tell us that it was pretty huge. It is almost the length of a football field and 4,891 tons in weight, which makes it one of the biggest things ever transported. To move the evaporator, Al Majdoui used a tractor-trailer truck with 172 axles and 688 double-width tires. The company boasts that the cargo is the biggest ever moved by road in the Middle East, and that probably holds true for the world as well. They're planning to move a bunch more of them in the near future. Maybe the Aramco oil refinery next. Number 5. Abu Simbel Temple. The site of Abu Simbel is one of the most recognizable ancient sites in Egypt. For 3,000 years, it sat on the west bank of the Nile River, between the first and second cataracts of the Nile. However, in a remarkable feat of engineering, the temple complex was dismantled and rebuilt on a higher hill to make way for the Aswan High Dam in the 1960s. Abu Simbel survived through ancient times, only to be threatened by modern progress. Because the site would soon be flooded by the rising Nile, it was decided that the temples should be moved. Moving the temples was a massive job, one that involved cutting it into pieces between 3 to 20 tons in weight and reassembling them precisely as they were. It took almost 5 years, involved about 3,000 workers, and cost about $42 million. Number 4. Newark International Airport Building 51. Usually, airports serve as a way to move people around. But in 2000 and 2001, an airport terminal in Newark became the object that was moved. It was one expensive ride, as it cost $6 million. The airport was the nation's busiest airport until LaGuardia opened 4 years later in 1939. However, as airports modernized and grew to accommodate more passengers, Building 51 became office space and eventually faced extinction, so that a runway could be expanded. The Port Authority decided that the building was worth saving. It took 5 months to move the whole building, which had to be cut into 3 separate pieces. The 2 side parts each weighed about 1,200 tons, while the central portion came in at 5,000 tons. To move the main part 3/4 of a mile, 176 dollies moved at a speed of 100 feet an hour. If you think that's big, wait for the first spot. Number 3. A rocket. Big space rockets are used to transport satellites and manned spaceships into orbit. But before they can do that, somebody has to wheel them into place on the launching pad. And as you might imagine, the immense Saturn V rocket that NASA used to send astronauts to the moon in the late 1960s to mid-1970s was quite a load to move. The Saturn V was 110.6 meters tall, which made it 18.3 meters bigger than the Statue of Liberty. And when fully loaded with fuel for liftoff, it weighed over 3,100 tons. That's roughly the weight of 400 elephants. In order to move it, NASA had to develop a truck that was nearly as big as the rocket itself. The 2,750-ton, 39.9-meter-long crawler transporter. It walked on tank-like treads on a special 3.5-mile-long road, whose surface was coated with Tennessee River rock to reduce the friction. It was designed to be powerful enough to move the equivalent of 3 Saturn Vs, though nobody has ever tried such a feat. The 2 crawler transporters are the largest tracked vehicles ever built, and they cost about $14 million in the 1960s, which would translate to about $100 million in today's dollars. But they proved so adept at moving the Saturn V that NASA also used them for the space shuttle, and is upgrading one of the 2 vehicles to handle the Space Launch System, the new booster rocket that NASA is developing for future manned missions. And with that, it's now time for today's subscriber pick. Today's photo was sent to us by a subscriber. If you come across a photo online and want to know more details about it, just send it over to us. We might even feature it on a future video. Number 2. Giant Windmill Blade. Mammoth Winds transported the world's longest wind turbine blade from LM Wind Power's pilot plant in Lunderskov to the Blast Test Center in Aalborg. Being the longest blade in the world, no transport equipment has been previously planned for such a scale. So LM Wind Power needed a specialist transport company to carry out this unique operation. The blade measures 88.4 meters in length, with a height of 4.47 meters when loaded on the truck. Precise planning was essential to this operation, as the clearance to pass under bridges measured just 3 centimeters. The transport of the blade went 100% as planned, even a little faster than expected. Number 1. Troll A Platform. The record for the most gigantic object ever moved by human beings is held by the Troll A platform. The Troll A is an offshore natural gas drilling platform off the west coast of Norway, and it weighs an astonishing 1.2 million tons and stands 471.8 meters tall, which makes it both the heaviest and the tallest thing that people have transported from one spot to another. Getting the platform to its location 174 miles from the Norwegian coast required the services of 10 tugboats, 8 spread out in front pulling the platform, and another 2 behind it to steer. This fleet of ships was able to travel at just 1 knot per hour, so it took 7 days and 6 hours to get to the destination. Once there, the tugs moved into a star formation around the platform to support it, as it was ballasted to stabilize it, and piles were driven 36 meters into the seabed to hold the platform in place. Not everyone can pull this off. That is our list of the biggest things ever transported. What is the biggest thing you guys have transported? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.